Greetings, viewers. Thanks for joining me out in the shop today for this power steering rack replace. This thing was totally whooped out. I said I had a bad tie rod end on it. I disassembled, I took the boot off so that I could examine the outer tie rod end. Yeah, it was completely whooped. The end of the rack was whooped. It had excessive up and down play. It had excessive in play, and it was leaking from both seals. This is how loose that tie rod is. Now, I can't tell you if that's worse or the same as when I went on my trip, but that's why I definitely don't want to drive it around on the road too much right now until I get that replaced. I don't like having the jack stands be in my way, and if you put them on the frame under here, they're kind of right in the way when you're wanting to replace the rack. I don't know if it's just 3rd gen 4Runners or other vehicles too, but there's a real nice provision right there on both sides to put a jack stand, chalk the back wheel, make sure it's against its park brake or against the park paw, and it isn't going to roll backwards on you. But yeah, that's a real nice place to put jack stands and not have them under your way or in your way when you're working under the front part there where the rack is. So I'm going to gather up some tools and get started putting that rack in. All right, gathered up some things you're going to need. We'll come under here and go over a couple of things first. First thing I like to do, make sure my steering wheel is perfectly centered. Sorry, crappy light. Get underneath your vehicle. You want to make sure the rack is right. So I give it a quick visual inspection. You will need a 22 for this. There's a bolt head on the other end over here. You'll need a 19 for these two to get this end piece off. I already put my polyurethane bushing in here because the old one was completely fried, but I'm going to reuse that because it's only been in there for not a few days. Make sure your rack is, when you're with your steering wheel centered, there's a seam right there where I got the white mark on the rack. Go straight above where that seam is and mark on that little piece that bolts on right there to your, that's part of your steering shaft coming down, because you'll unbolt that and slide it off of the splines that I'll show you on the other rack. But make sure you've got your steering wheel centered and you mark that for your center so you can line it up on your other new rack, and then your steering wheel will be centered. Now, before I go show you how to center the rack you just got, let me just say that frickin' pinion seal I got out of that Yukon kit is also leaking. The 2 seals I was able to use out of that Yukon kit, both of them leak. I've been installing seals for a long damn time. I know I didn't mess those up, so that's my bitch there, okay? I'm not happy with those seals. I don't blame Yukon because that kit was open, but whatever. Here's that seam I was talking about here on your new rack. It comes with, underneath this rubber protector, it comes with this little rust preventative thing. This is the spliny part I'm talking about you got to adjust to. Put this rubber piece back on, and I'll show you how to center the rack here real quick. Don't assume that it came centered. Wow, okay, good. Go for a little ride with me sometimes here, don't you? All right, I'll try to show you this and stay out of the way. Don't just assume this rack is centered from the factory, because I've gotten some that have been all the way to one side or another. Leave your rubbery protector thing on, and you don't need a real tight grip, just an easy grip will get it. Now, put this, I like to put this right lined up with my with the seam so I can try and see where it's centered. So what I'm going to do now is count the turns all the way one way to the other way. So from starting even with this tie rod end, 1, 2, 3, 3.5 turns exactly. So I need 1 3/4 turns back will center the rack. So then I'll go 1.5 and 3/4, which is right where I put it. So this rack might have been centered. Now just to test it, keep going and count your 1 3/4 from here. 1/2, not quite 3/4. So it's a little bit off. 1, 2, 3.5. That's perfect. So we'll go 1.5 and not quite that 3/4, and we'll put it right there. I'm going to run that back and forth a couple more times till I'm perfectly happy that I've got it directly in the center, but you get the idea how that's done. Okay, I just run that back and forth a couple times. It ended up, when I go straight from where I like to call lined up here, I got a 1 5/8 turns each direction, close as I could get it. Now, I want to take my paint marker, removing my vice grips and everything gently. This is my line that I said I didn't have to mark. Oops, looking through the camera, I can't see it. Okay, there's the line I said I didn't have to mark. And then I want to go straight up onto here with it. So that's where I'll line up my piece when I put it on. That mark got a little fat. Can you even see it with the light? Anyway, I put a big white mark right there lined up. So now I know my rack is centered. So if it should get turned or moved in some way, I can line it back up. I have to do it the sucky way from the top. So I'll edit all that out. Okay, well, it's going to show you my trick for busting this nut loose, because it's only on there with a couple of spot welds, and you can usually snap it loose and then just hold the top and get it off of there. But I was unable to get this one without stripping it, so not going to show you that trick, but 9 out of 10 times that works. What you need to get this loose is a 19 from the top. It's kind of a bear to get to with your dipstick and your tranny pan and your power steering lines all in the way, which is why I like to break loose that nut. But it didn't cooperate with me this time, so I'm going to get this broke loose and then get up in there with my ratchet and ratchet that one off. The other ones you can get to with your impact. This is going to suck for a minute. I'll be back. All right, well, it only sucked mediumly bad to get broke loose. I bet it's going to suck just as bad to undo it, because you can't get much swing on your ratchet because of the oil pan. So you can get a little bit over here on this side. You can see what I'm doing there. So I sprayed it. I'm going to have to baby it out of there because my trick didn't work. So this is a sucky one. I'll be back in a minute. And don't be me. If you're using your large drive, your 1/2-inch drive, ratchet, and socket, once you get that nut up so far, it hits on the bottom of the transmission, and then you can't get your wrench off, and then you've got to turn it back to tighten while it's stuck in there, and tighten it back up till the wrench comes off, so you can switch to your smaller wrench. So don't be a me, and use the correct tools the first time. Yeah, I did bend this line out of my way so I'd have more room to swing my ratchet. That line comes new on your new rack, so it isn't an impertinent one anyway. See how much of a pain in the butt this is. I am going to remove this tie or the sway bar eventually. Thought I was going to remove it before the last trip and I didn't. Maybe I'll remove it, maybe I won't. If it gets in the way of this at all, it's coming out. But I tried to do that without it. Then use your impact here. Hold on the other side. Right off. Chase it around. That nut or bolt pulls out the other end right under your leaking differential seal that came in your kit that didn't work. Now 2 seals I need to replace. Both of them suck. Guess what's going to leak for a while? That's how I know it has juice in it, right? All right, got that one. Got to get these over here with the 19. I need my extension for the top one. Now I got that line bent up in my way. These are just going to come right off because I just had them off. This is also how I'm going to drain the fluid here in a minute too, if you're curious about that step. Because you got to get it all. You don't want it leaking on you. You don't want it making a mess of your cardboard. I hope I'm not putting my head in the camera. I like to put on my nuts and bolts and things under my jack stand so that keeps them from getting kicked around by mistake. That's probably pretty obvious to most of you, but maybe not. Now I'm going to come over here, bringeth my light, work on that 12. Whoop. I'll tell you what, it is so hard to find good quality stuffs sometimes, but I do like this light for the most part. So anyway, that 12, boom, right there. I may need to do that one too, but probably just this one will be able to free it up enough. Now I may have to move the rack down some to get to the lines in the back and to get that to slide off, but taking that bolt out's the next thing. It's a good reason for marking it. I had to turn it a little bit here so it's easier to get that nut or that bolt out. So I turned it. Once I get that bolt out before I slip it off there, I can turn it back to straight. Setting the wheel back to straight inside the truck will get you the same desired effect as long as you know your rack is straight. But I just like to make sure everything doesn't move. So it is necessary for that bolt to come all the way out because the little area between the splines that I showed you on the other rack, that bolt actually goes in there to help hold that on. While I got it still over out of the way, I'll take a big screwdriver in there, put it in the slot right here, and try to give it a little spread apart. That way, when I'm ready to drop the rack, it'll come right out, right? Using a big screwdriver like this, I like, because I could stick that in the slot there, and then you can put a wrench on it here to give you a little leverage. You don't need a lot. It's not going to like spread open and stay, but you just need to make sure it is moving so that it isn't going to stick on there when we're done. So I did that. Now I'm putting it back where it goes. Time to drain the fluid while I get the tie rod ends out. I like all the fluid to come out. I'll go around and take my reservoir lid off, and then I'm just going to snap one of these lines off, probably where that one goes into that housing. It looks like it'll probably break there, and that'll get my fluid draining. I can get my tie rod ends loose. Only took a few wiggles of that line and it broke. Now I'm going to let that go ahead and drain. Get this bushing here back off so I can save it. That's going to bite me. Let me just put my screwdriver. Anyway, let me grab that off. Oh, there we go. Let me get that off of there so I can have that. Next thing after it drains, of course, tie rod ends are next. Let me battle this off there. I'll be right back. Okay, and in case you were not aware, your new rack comes with new bushings here and here. Oh, where you can't see, it comes with new bushings here and here, but it does not come with that bushing that fits in the thing that goes on the end I just took off. I bought a set of polyurethanes. This is the polyurethane bushing. I'm putting it back there. And again, I'm not changing out the middle one and the left side one in the interest of saving time, as I have one day to get this done. so that I can go have some fun. So now I'm going to break my tie rod ends loose, and now all this straight everything up might be a little overkill, because if your rack is centered like I showed you, and your steering wheel is centered and not been spun around, all you got to do is put it in, line your tie rods up, which I'll show you how to do that. Very similar to the alignment thing. Had I known at that time that my tie rod end was so bad, I wouldn't have aligned it. I missed it because I didn't check it. I didn't check it because it was on the ground. And I just wanted to get my alignment set straight so it wouldn't wear my tire out. So you're going to have to end up taking the boots off. Get your wrenches on here. You got your lock nut. I just did these. I don't have the size wrench that needs, I don't think, in my boxes while I'm using these, but it don't matter. As long as it gets the job done, you ain't rounding things off. It don't matter a whole bunch of going the wrong way there. I need to go this way, don't I? Yeah, I do. Okay. Well, I'm going to take these lock nuts loose. I don't know why this one has double lock nuts on it. I don't think I ever noticed that before on one, but I could be wrong. I'm going to get these things loose. Okay, now once you get both of your lock nuts loose here on the end, you can see what I'm doing. This will just spin out your tie rod. This is your inner tie rod end. You can just spin it out. I know this one is bent just slightly, but again, in the interest of getting things done, it's new. I'm not going to replace it just because of a slight bend. If it was really bent, it'd be a different story. That's probably how I fried that tie rod in too, because I did check them when I first got the truck. Didn't notice it. Who knows what happened. But anyway, my steering will be way better. I'm going to go ahead and thread this one off, do the same thing on the other side. Then these will be hanging loose. The new rack will be ready to go in as soon as I get those top ones loose. She's still draining. Let me do this and then I'll do the other side. Now sometimes these can be a real bear to get loose. These both came apart halfway decent for me. Appreciative of that. Spinning the inner tie rod gets these out. Now if you have, like say, a solid axle truck where you've got one tie rod going across, it'll be, your tie rod ends will be threaded on there. One will be right hand thread, one will be left hand thread, so that when you turn the rod itself, it'll either pull the sides together or push them apart. IFS truck isn't like that because you got a rack, so both of these unthread correctly counterclockwise. If this were, like I said, a solid axle vehicle, one of your lock nuts you would unthread counterclockwise and one you would do clockwise. I should have got a nut driver for that. Woo! Look at all the juice that just shot out of there. I hope you saw that. Went right down my sleeve too. That is some water, I'm sure. I don't know how water's getting in there, but that is some juice too, I'd almost bet you, from this thing. So let me get started on this. Get that wrench off there. So yeah, I can start getting this one unscrewed here. Let's see. Yeah, this is the way it'll go to undo. Is it bent too? It does appear as though this one might be bent on the inside. That's some weird flex. All right, let me get back to this. Okay, well, it was not my outers that are bent at all. It was the inner. I sprayed myself about 3 more times with all that shit coming out of it. But I did get it up there and spin it, and it is actually the inner that's bent. I inspected the one on the other side and found the same thing. So both my tie rod ends are still good. I'm going to keep them for now. I'm sure I'm going to need to replace some front end parts as I go along, but so far I'm really happy. couple of really hard tests, but this rack was trashed anyway, so I'm not attributing the trashedness of this rack to my wheel in this thing. So this will baseline it, right? I'm gonna go over to the other side and get those two lines loose and be ready to pull this thing out. Okay, the only things left are your lines now. They are 17s. You gotta still pry that thing up, but it'll come time for that when you're ready to drop it. You can sneak a wrench in there and get on that and pry it loose. You can come around to the front and take those transmission lines loose and get some more room. I prefer to fight it. All right, I definitely should not have said I prefer to fight it out loud. Got the torch out. Could get my 17 on that first one. It wasn't giving up. Just stripped. Took the sway bar off to get better access. Was going to get rid of it anyway. Still couldn't get it off. That's okay. The one closest to me is the return line. There's a rubber hose that's removable right just past this piece of the frame here. But I said this rack was whooped. Well, apparently the previous owner knew it because the bottom line, the pressure line, was completely rounded off. I tried vice gripping it too because that's what, was already done to it. Wasn't happening. I cut the first one across the angle there with my sawzall and down the face, and then busted it off with the chisel. Made sure to stay out of my threads. Got to be careful. Second one, I just cut down the rack until I got past the bottom one. Now I'll have to cut that aluminum up, but it'll be easier to get to with the rack out of the way. I didn't see another way to do it. Just rounding them off, and I got sick of fussing with it. Now I just got to pop that little piece loose up on the top there, and this rack will drop down, and we'll go over to the new rack. Well, okay, if I ever say I want to fight it again, geez, just slap me. I'll remember to do that myself. Underneath there, you saw I had to cut this up to get those lines off. I still have to get the excess aluminum off of there, but it'll be easy now. I can get better access to the lines. I think I should change my show to frickin' Rust Belt Repairs or something. Those were rounded off bad. Somebody's been in here before. I got that bowled out. This is supposed to slide off. I shit you not, I spent an hour probably fighting these lines and then eventually cutting this off, and another hour trying to get this apart and trying to get this rag joint apart. I ultimately had to cut one of the bolts off. I have never seen a vehicle fight so freaking hard to get brand new parts put on in my life. Wow. But now it's all off. I'm going to get my rag joint off and get this piece off of this shaft here, hopefully. Geez, that does not want to come off of there. I got it spread apart like it's supposed to be. It's spitting fluid at me, but I got it all spread apart there. You can't hardly see it. Yeah, so I'm gonna have to fight that. I'm gonna have to get my lines off so that I can go back on here. This job has taken forever. I've created a mess. I've broke out grinders, but that's the shit that happens sometimes, and I still stand by. Do it, damn it. I hope you could see that. Get out there and, here, let me try this. Yeah, no, you can't. You can't. Where is it? There it is. Yay! Don't look at my mug. Look at my shirt. Do it, damn it. Get out there and wrench on your own stuff. This sucks. I should have been done with this a long time ago. But for you people who aren't in the Rust Belt, you don't know what it's like. You people who are, you're with me when there's a mess like this under your vehicle to try to get one thing off. There's a meme out. What's it say? Every 2-hour job is one rusted bolt away from taking 3 days. That ain't no shit. I'm going to get my lines ready, get this off, bolted back up so that it slides onto here. I'll clean all that up. I'll tune you back in as I do these things, I'm done for the day. So it'll be tomorrow when I get back. You won't even know I was gone. Okay, once you clean up all the excess tools that aren't associated with changing a power steering rack, pretend like it didn't take 2 hours and you got 2 hours more to do to finish getting things prepared for the job. You got your dog out now, so that's extra relief, some stress relief. The dirt is my fault. I did actually get more than 3/4 of the fluid that just soaked into the cardboard and made a big mess, but fighting it like I had to did not turn out as nice as you thought. So you might be thinking now, well, shit, why did you go to all that trouble to mark everything, and now I've moved the wheels. They're not pointing straight. I've spun the steering wheel. Point still being, you centered the rack. So you know that is center on the rack. You come back in here, set your steering wheel to the center. After I'm done and this is bolted back up, my white mark that I put on this thing, which is gone now, will, I remember where it was because it's right alongside that nut. But anyway, when I go to put that all back together, I'll explain it. But once this is bolted back on and the steering wheel is straight and this is straight, that's all that really matters. The mark on here doesn't, because if this is straight and your steering wheel is straight and you bolt this back together, then when it comes time to bring your tie rods in, you bring them in equal amount of turns on each side. I'll show you all that when I get there. Right now I got to keep my dog from eating the nuts and bolts. He's putting them in his hubcap over there. Give me that. He is a nut, man. He's eating a freaking nut from my power steering job. I'm going to change your name to something else too, muttonhead. Hey, quit! No! Now there. So anyway, I'm going to stop this so I can look at him for a minute. I just wanted to come back and say it isn't screwed at this point. It's all easy enough to go back together. Still do it, damn it. Don't be afraid. This is so easy to put back together. You might look at it and think, holy shit, it's all fucked up now. But it's not. So I'll be back here in a minute and we'll start putting that back together. I'm not going to show you the struggle with this, but I'll tell you about it later, because I know getting them lines loose and getting that off is not going to be easy. Okay, viewers, we have gone far beyond ridiculous here. This is the part of the rack that had the two fittings stuck in it. Much more cutting to get that off this morning. Freed up my fittings. This is the return line. I have another one of these, no big deal. And even though I cut into the threads, it's compression fit, so it'd still be okay. I have another one of these I'm going to use. I'm just stealing it off another part I have here. The end that went into the rack on the pressure line, that nut, of course, rounded off, but is also frozen to the pipe. New Toyota line, $411. My cost, $500 plus for the average person. Is this even savable? Man. I am going to try, because a non-Toyota line is $145. I don't want to spend $145. I'm going to try and thread this line into my new rack, force it through its spot in the frame, and see if I can't save this line. This job has, like I say, it's gone way beyond ridiculous as far as getting things apart. I didn't think I was ever going to get this daggone thing off. I never seen something fight so hard, but I cleaned it all up inside, and it slips on and off like it should now. So I can put that on. If I can get this line in onto here and it's pointing the correct direction, I'm going to try to feed it through. I don't want to buy a new line. This is nuts. It took me, altogether, I've been about 2.5 hours getting that piece off and getting those lines free. This has been a challenge for sure, but don't give up, persevere, keep right on going. Let me see if I can get that line threaded in there, make sure that rusty spot ain't leaking spot, and I'll be back. Well, my random parts selection didn't help me here. There's 2 bolts you got to take out. One's right there, you can see where the bracket's out for these lines. There's another one kind of right on the other side of here. You can get through here with it and through the front here and get your 10mm on it. Got to get those loose. Now I said I didn't want to buy a new line. I took that old line out with that frozen end on it, threaded it back into the rack and tightened it up. Now I'm going to try and reverse thread all this over the top of the frame, back down into its place over here, and back up to the power steering pump. See if I can't salvage this job without buying more parts. Bolt this back on first, get it lined up, center my steering wheel again, and I'll show you how to do it. Tie rods and the alignment part. Jeez Louise, this has been a battle. Okay, so we're back to center your steering wheel. Get underneath of here, and you want to know something? Feeding that line on up there and then running it backwards through the frame was real easy. So you could say I'm crazy for doing all that when I could spend $150 on a line. I don't want to spend $150 on a line, and I don't want to leave. I want to get my vehicle done. So anyway, I fed that up through there backwards. Get your piece back on here, lined up with your white line. Now, once you center your steering wheel, just make sure your rack is still centered. Slide it on where it fits, which that's right alongside that bolt hole, just like before. Needs to be tapped down on there just a hair more. Run your bolt through and put your 22 on. Run that 19 down. Run these 19s down real quick, and I'll show you how to do the tie rod ends. That one's a whole lot easier to get to without the sway bar in there too. Excuse me, I did tap that one down and bolt it together. Just for good measure, I run my steering wheel 1 3/4 times around to each direction, put it back in the middle, just so I'd know when I'm ready to start setting my tie rods that I am perfectly in the middle. So 1 more bolt up there, and then those 2 on the end, crank everything down. Be right back. And just because you're all happy and ready to put it back together, these are 2 different sizes. The short one goes in this center spot. Don't get too excited that everything looks like it's going back together and put the wrong one in the wrong spot. I have to take it back out again because I do that. All right, once you get all your bolts tightened back up, seriously, this is like a 2-hour job that I am on my 2nd day and on my 7th and 8th hours working on this right now. I'm going to slide this clip. Hope you can see what I'm doing since I can't watch that. I'm going to take that 2nd lock nut off there because I don't see a reason for it. So I'm just going to slide this up onto here and bring this over, and I have to push your rod down. Now again, I have double checked by turning my steering wheel and counting the turns that everything is where it's supposed to be. Double check. Everything is centered up like it's supposed to be and ready to put your tie rod ends on. That's pretty stiff because it's brand new, but it'll get to moving around where you need it. Woo, use your pliers. Hands aren't hammers, right? Something like that. All right, am I getting to the right angle? Getting close. Just got to take your time and line that up. You don't want to cross any threads. Now this one, we'll turn this direction to get started. I'm going to get my wrench instead of my pliers so I don't fuck it up. Turn this direction. I'm going to take my paint marker and put a dot not where my threads are so that I can keep count of how many times around I go with this side. Then I'll do the other side. Then we'll get our tape measure out and start tape measuring some stuff. Okay, now it is kind of a bear to line up to get it started, but I did get it started. Make sure you put your line on there and you're counting your turns. Not necessarily as crucial, because with your tape measure, am I still even on there right? Okay, yeah, I should look at that more. You can start measuring, you can tell when your drum starts, or your rotor starts getting straight, but you can measure off your frame, measure across rotor to rotor even, but at the beginning, I like to count them all the way around just because. But once they start getting close, we'll do the thing with the tape measure on the tires to get it all set straight. I'm gonna go ahead and run this around. Now this one this part runs around counterclockwise to tighten, but if you were threading this end, it would thread in, the tie rod end, I'm sorry. This right here goes counterclockwise on this. I said these are regular thread, because if you were threading in the tie rod, it would thread right-hand thread into this, just like they're supposed to. No left-hand threads on these. Rambling on. The observant amongst you might have noticed I left that off. Oops. Looks like that one's going to get a screw clamp on that end. All right, forget what I said about counting your turns as you thread them on. That's way too many to bother with counting. I just run them both in close. I like to run it so that both of the front tires are still pointing slightly ahead. Of course, you can't tell this completely until it's on the ground. While I got it up in the air, I put my power steering line back on, which you ordinarily wouldn't have to do that, but you'd still be void of fluid. After I put my hose on, made sure everything was hooked up, I start filling this up, let it bleed down some, give it another big gulp, and it'll bleed down some more. Then it'll be ready to start bleeding the system. I'll get to that in a minute as well. I have to get this down off the jack stands. I'm going to string each tire, see which one's the furthest out, try to do my adjustments. I'll explain that as I go. You guys set it on the ground and run it back and forth. I'm going to drive it out, I'm going to hold my steering wheel straight, going to drive it back in, then I'm going to string test my tires, see which one's off which way. That's how I'll finish the underneath part. I bolted my lines back up. Cleaned my mass airflow because I had to take my air box out to get my line off, so you know, if you got stuff apart, you might as well do that too. I think I need to drive it back out and back in to settle the suspension, leaving my steering wheel where it is nice and straight. I'll string it, see how they look, try to get them both the same, and then get under there and split the difference. Okay, so it definitely appears to me, just sighting down them, that they're both slightly in on the front. I'm going to go hook up my string and show you my string method again. Okay, I tie a loop in my string, hook it on my e-brake bracket on the back. You pointing in the right direction even? Hang on, I didn't look. I just set it down. Oh no, you know. Alright, so kind of get you even with both tires there, kind of. Run it down the middle, pull it nice and tight. As it's hitting your back tire, it should be hitting your front tire about the same time. Man, these both look really good. I just do it by sight. I'm going to throw a tape measure on it. If anything, I'd say they're both slightly out at the front. So if my width across is wider in the front and narrower in the back, I'll spread them apart. I get my cardboard set up, my tape measure, and we'll commence to measuring again. What was it before? 64 5/8 across the back, right? As far as bleeding them or bleeding the system or setting the alignment, which one you do first is irrelevant. Some of you may think I went through a lot of unnecessary nonsense when I could just bought a new line. But I guess that's the lengths I'm willing to go through to save $150 on a AutoZone line, or $411 my cost on a Toyota line. But I'm going wheeling. I'm supposed to be loaded up on a trailer and heading out in about 18 hours or less. Actually less now. Yeah, so that. I'm going to get under there, measure, take my measures. I'll bring Aaron there with me. Okay, I measured across my front. It was 65. Hopefully I don't have to fumble with the same freaking tape measure because I brought the same one down with me again. But 65, which should put me like 64 and an eighth roughly. Ooh, no. I don't remember my old measurements very well. I am 65. Oh, because I'm measuring from a different lug. That's right. Sorry. So I'm 65 across the front. I'm 64 and 3/4 heavy across the back. I'm going to take a turn out of each side because when I did my string line, it appeared to me as though they were both the same amount wider in the front. I meant to stop and not go that far with it, but I'm going to make this, that's in. Okay, I'm going to come half a turn on this one to bring it out. Come on. It's a counterclockwise turn of this piece. I'm going a half on this side. I'm going to scooch over and do the half on the other side. Okay, I got to measure it again, but I wanted to show why that white mark is important one more time. I knew my steering wheel was straight. I checked that mark. My angle kind of makes it look crooked, but it's straight. That saves me from having to get out after each adjustment and go up and make sure my steering wheel is still centered. So let me measure this across, see what that got me. My measurements are different because this time I'm measuring from the other tread lug, the alternate of the one I did last time. Okay, that brought me out just barely 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to go that again. You get the idea. I'm going to do the same thing on both sides. I'm going to string test it. I'll show you that and measure test it again, but let me go back and forth here. It's the same basic idea. Okay, so that only took me like 4 more times because I wanted to make sure it was right. After I thought I had it right, I backed the truck up, pulled forward, hit the brakes hard, checked it again. Still seemed to be where I want it. I got to tighten these down. Then I'm going to jack up the front. We're going to bleed the system. I'm going to call this 2 full day frickin' job. That should take 2 hours. We'll call it done if there ain't any leaks. After I get stuff tightened up, I like to put a couple paint marks on it so at least the first time out you can keep track of it, see if everything stays tight. I got to put a clamp on that boot yet. And it doesn't matter if you put a big ugly dirty screw clamp on that boot on your brand new shiny steering rack because it doesn't spin, so it doesn't matter. I managed to remember the other one on the other side though. Well, all right, the 9-hour rack replacement has come down to this. The alignment is set. It's time to bleed it and check it for leaks. If it leaks a little, I'm going wheeling. Jack your vehicle up so the tires are just barely off the ground. My reservoir is mostly full, but not entirely. You want to monitor this as you're going. Yeah, I spilled a bunch all over everywhere. I'm going to start the vehicle up. You can do this with the window down, or it's easier from in here. Oh, she's running. All right, now take your wheel from lock to lock all the way around. That's 1 3/4 turns, by the way. That's back to straight, right there. Around the other way. 1 3/4 turns. Boom, baby, got her just right. All right, do that a couple, 3 times. Don't let your reservoir run dry. All right, I'm gonna put that right there. Go check my fluid. It's not all foamy, and that's good. It's part of why I like to do it last. After I filled it and let it trickle down, then filled it some more and let it trickle down. Then I back it in and out before I set the alignment and let it run a little bit without turning the wheel, mind you. Now it's just sucked down a little bit and it ain't full of foam. I'm gonna fill it back up, see if it's percolating. Now I shut it off to add fluid because where that is positioned when the engine is running, if you try to dump fluid into there, it just blows it back. I got enough trouble spilling it everywhere without that additional help. Now I wasn't getting any weird noise. My power steering pump's been making grindy noises since day one. Well, maybe not since day one of the truck, but since day one that I've had it. My green one did. My black one did. I got power steering pump on the shelf. Actually 2 or 3 of them for just in case. But I digress. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm gonna look and see. Now if you got somebody to help, you can watch that and see if it's foaming or bubbling up. If it wasn't over full, you might be able to see it percolating. I'm gonna set this on the ground and see what kind of power steering I got. Hang on. Back on the ground, jack out from under. Let's see if she don't turn. Smooth. All right, 1 finger. Oh yeah. Whoops. Honk the horn. 1 3/4 turn. Square. 1 3/4 turns. She's right. 1 finger will turn it. Now, I'm gonna drive it around, make sure my steering wheel is square. If it's not, you get right back under there and do all that adjustment stuff again. I'm not gonna show you that. This is done, this is over. This is an hour of video. Man, this job killed me. Now, if everything had come apart, I swear you could have that job done 2 hours. Enough of that. Appreciate you tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the show today. Edit out all the BS, me having to chase rusted bolts and crap. And this job would be real easy. But remember that every 2-hour job's 1 rusted bolt away from taking 9 hours over the span of 2 days. Like and subscribe, please. It's easy, quick, and painless. Check links in the description if you're so inclined. Most of all, I appreciate you. Have a great day.